If you're looking to jumpstart your decluttering, this video is for you. Hello and welcome to Abundantly Minimal. My name is Sarah and thank you for joining me for today's video. Today I'll be walking you through the steps of the 30-day decluttering challenge and give you guidance about what things you'll be decluttering on what day, with hopes that it helps you transform your space and really live your best life with less. And to make this a little bit easier as you go through the challenge over the next 30 days or whenever you choose to start implementing this, I did put together a free workbook for you. It is the 30-day decluttering challenge workbook, and I have the link in the description field below. Like I said, it is free and it will be able to provide some additional tips about each item, as well as a spot for you to sort of set your goals and reflect about what you're able to do in that category. So if you're looking for an easy way to keep things organized, that 14-page printable is for you. And of course, with any sort of decluttering video with ideas or a challenge, not everything might apply directly to your life. We all have different clutter that some we value more than others, some is more of a problem for us. So I'm hopeful this will be a really helpful guide, but of course there might be certain days that aren't really an issue for you, in which you can either take a day off or you can focus on something else that's a bit more challenging. The challenge starts off a little more simple and gets harder as you go, which is really nice to help you build momentum. So on day number 1, you need to identify a flat surface in your space. Flat surfaces sometimes seem to attract clutter, so if we can target one specific zone and focus on removing excess clutter from that area, you're immediately going to start feeling the benefits. If you're feeling ambitious, identify several surfaces in your space that you're able to keep clutter-free, and really try to find homes for those miscellaneous items that somehow accumulate on the surface. And it can even be helpful to ask yourself, do I actually need this? Does this item need to be here? Maybe it belongs somewhere else or not even in your home at all. Day number 2 is to identify a purse or bag or backpack of some sort that has clutter in it. I know that personally, different bags and purses can get pretty cluttered pretty easily since you're throwing receipts and other miscellaneous items in them. Focus on emptying out the contents of the purse or bag and really focus on putting in the essentials only. It's even better if your purse or bag has some sort of side pockets in which you can identify what belongs where, so you don't have to be awkwardly digging around for the items when you need them. Day number 3 is dealing with the pantry or wherever you store your food. Oftentimes they can become pretty cluttered, especially if we find ourselves not going through everything in the pantry before we buy new things. Certain items might get pushed to the back and we forget that we have them. Let's figure out what's back there, remove some of that excess, go through it. Maybe foods you're not eating or not planning to eat could be donated. Maybe you can use this as an opportunity to challenge you to use up some of these ingredients. And maybe you don't even allow yourself to buy new groceries until you've made a couple meals using some of the food that you already have. Of course, if some food is very expired and perhaps no longer edible, those things also don't need to be taking up precious space there. Really figure out what your ideal setup would be and try to align it as much to that. Day number 4 is a bathroom. Find a bathroom in your space and choose an element of that you'd like to declutter. Sure, you could try to shoot for the entire space, but that might be overwhelming. Focus on one key part. Do you have a lot of clutter in the shower or bathtub area? Lots of products that you don't actually use every day? Do those have to be in there? Do you try out different beauty or personal care products and then realize you don't actually like them but feel bad about getting rid of them, so they just sit there? There's no merit to holding on to an item you'll never actually use again. Let go of some of these extra items. If they didn't work for you, then get rid of them. The product's not going to magically get better and become a higher quality item just by sitting there. Maybe it's dealing with your medicine cabinet or below the sink. Wherever it's a challenge for you in the bathroom, that would be the area to simplify. Day number 5 is all about dishes. Go through the dishware you have, cups, plates, bowls, silverware, anything like that, and question to see if you've got more than you actually need. You may have some extras that you can let go of. Jake and I have done this over the years, reducing the numbers of plates and cups and things that we had because we really didn't need them, especially since we were often washing dishes on a fairly regular basis. Decide what that essential number is to you. Just because the plates came in a set of 12 doesn't mean you actually use all 12 all the time. For day number 6, let's go to a desk drawer, or if you don't have a desk in your space, some sort of drawer where you might keep paper products or office supplies. You could even do this at your desk at work. Really identify what has to be in this drawer, and if you've got extra stuff there, there's no harm in getting rid of that or finding alternative placement. It really comes down to what you use on a regular basis. Imagine how much better you'll feel and how much time you'd save if your desk was streamlined to the point of what you actually used and you knew right where everything was. Less clutter means easier to get what you need and what you actually use. Day number 7 is electronic devices. If you have found yourself upgrading to some of the newer electronic devices, what did you do with your old one? Is it still in your space? If you likely will not be ever returning to that item, you can look into recycling it or disposing of it properly. Yes, it is a little bit more difficult sometimes to figure out where they go, but if you can even identify just one old piece of technology that you can deal with, that would be amazing. Perhaps you might even be able to sell it. We actually recently sold an old desktop computer from 2009 for $150. It worked well. We found a buyer. They were happy to get the computer, and we were happy to let go of it. So it does take a little bit more of a commitment, but can be so worthwhile. Day number 8 is books. If you have books that you have never read and don't honestly see yourself reading, there's not much of a point into holding on to them. Likewise, maybe you've read books, but you don't think you will actually read them again, and you don't necessarily want to hold on to them for a fun memory, then there's no reason you have to hold on to that. I know a lot of people feel very connected to their books, but one cool option if you feel like the idea of giving away your books makes you sad, I like to think about re-gifting books. If there's been a book that I have read that was my own, that I really enjoyed, how special is it to give that book to another person who you know might enjoy it? Day number 9 is tools. If you find yourself having extra tools in your space, either that you don't know what they are and no one in the house knows what they are, or they were maybe left over from a very specific project, or you have duplicates, get rid of some of them. Just like we mentioned before, having a cluttered toolbox with too many items is going to slow you down when it actually counts, when you're working on a project or trying to do a repair. So really keep it simple and highlight the ones that are most used and most important. Day number 10 deals with past clothing. What clothing are you holding on to from your past that you're no longer wearing? Maybe it's old styles, old sizes, just a different you who was wearing those clothes. Are you actually going to return to them? If not, these are perfect candidates to let go of or repurpose for something else. Day 11 looks at present clothing. What clothing are you currently wearing that's just not as comfortable as you'd hope or doesn't reflect your current style? Maybe you have duplicates of certain pieces of clothing that no longer need to be there. Maybe you even have clothing that's currently in your closet or in your dresser, and it might even still have the price tags on it, but you just aren't wearing it. Maybe you are held back by some guilt. Try to streamline your closet or your wardrobe to be more minimal. And the best part is a simplified wardrobe helps you get dressed faster, it's easier to make those choices, and your clothing actually has space to breathe and not be all crammed together. Day number 12 is future clothing. Think about what you ultimately want your clothing style to be in the future. Does what you currently have align with that? This is a great chance for prevention. Focus on being more mindful about clothing purchases you're making and either reduce them or make sure the purchases are more intentional and not just because something looked cute or was on sale. Day 13 is to declutter your car. If you do have a car, sometimes these can accumulate clutter as well. Sometimes there's clutter that's not dealt with, that's hanging out in the car for weeks or even months. Can you relate to this? Don't worry, I've been there. Now, I don't actually have my own car anymore, but if you do have a car, this is a great chance to do a deep clean of it, try to get it back to almost that new car or like a rental car feeling, where you only have those essential documents in the glove compartment and pretty much everything else is empty. It might even be helpful to put in place a 24-hour rule where if you put something in your car, it has to be gone within 24 hours or dealt with within 24 hours, just because that prevents the buildup from happening. Day 14 is all about movies or DVDs. If you find yourself having a larger movie collection than you'd like, this is a great chance to pare it down. If you're trying to save space, maybe opt for an organizer for DVDs that can remove the cases, so it takes up a lot less space, but the DVDs are still protected. You might even find you've got past technologies, movies. Do you still have VHS tapes? Do you ever watch them? Do you own a VCR? If not, those can definitely be disposed of because you're not likely going to start watching VHSs going forward. So it really depends on how you consume that particular media and if what you have aligns with that. There's nothing wrong with getting rid of that obsolete technology. Day 15 is digital clutter. Digital clutter can manifest itself in many different ways. Reflecting on your worst area for digital clutter can be a great first step, and then figure out, maybe set some goals of how much you'd like to reduce it. Personally, my biggest challenge, since I run 2 companies, is that I just create and go through a large number of files on almost a daily basis. I'm usually creating or downloading between 20 and 40 files a day, which is a lot. Even the process of filming and editing and uploading this video likely generated between 60 and 80 files on my computer, which is a lot. No matter what types of digital clutter you have, really developing some sort of system is going to be the best option for you moving forward. So maybe it's creating a temporary folder on the desktop of your computer. Maybe it's taking a few moments after you've taken a lot of pictures to delete the pictures that aren't as good, just to get rid of them right then while they're fresh in your mind. Maybe it's unfollowing people on social media who don't align with your values or don't make you feel good. Any of those could be options that can help you reduce the digital clutter you're dealing with. All right, halfway through, day 16 is all about photos. So I know I hinted at photos a little bit if you've got digital photos, and you could still apply that with day 16, but this also could be if you've got a lot of printed photos. This is where things start to get a little bit more difficult in the sense of photos are often more emotional clutter. We might feel attached to things, but we also might recognize, I've got way too many photos, I need to go through them. One thing I've said in past videos that is very true here is when we have too many of a certain item, it dilutes the value of all the items. For instance, if you have 100 printed pictures compared to 10,000 printed pictures, there's a lot more value in each of those 100 pictures than there are in each picture, than the same pictures even, if they were mixed into those 10,000 photos. Obviously, these might be more extreme numbers. I'm not sure how many pictures you have, and there's no need for you to actually count them. But if we can identify that if we keep only the best of the best photos, we're able to celebrate them more than if we kept all the photos. Because the person who's got 100 photos could easily look back at those photos and access them at any point. The person who has 10,000 photos, they would need to take a whole day or more if they were looking for a photo or needing time to go through their photos. It would probably be a fun day walking down memory lane, but that's time consuming and tedious. So if you can start to break down the photos you have and figure out what the priorities are, no matter how you organize them, that's going to be a really great first step. Day 17 deals with decorations. What decorations do you have in your space that are no longer adding value? I'm personally not a big decorator, but for those I know who do like to decorate, oftentimes their style evolves over time. Maybe it's seasonal, maybe it has to do with just different phases of life. But as the decoration style evolves, they're not necessarily getting rid of all of the past decorations, even though they're no longer displaying those. Likewise, as you receive new items and maybe are adding to those, there's certain neglected decorations that aren't the focal point anymore. These are definitely valid options of things that you could get rid of. Really reflect, do I love this item? Does this item make me happy when it's displayed here? And if the answer is no, then that's a perfect candidate for something to let go of. Now let's get into some storage areas. Day 18 is about decluttering part of your basement. If you've got one, if you don't have a basement, maybe focus on a closet or something, some area of storage that you have. Basements can often be a dumping ground of miscellaneous or random items. And of course, a basement cannot be decluttered in one day. So identify one small part of the basement you'd like to focus on, even if it's just a couple items that you go through and try to figure out what to do with them. If you're holding on to any just-in-case items, really ask yourself if that fear of just in case this happens is justified. If there are items that have been down there and untouched for years, or even just 1 year, those are definitely items to question. Day 19 is about an attic, again, if you've got one. If not, find another storage area you can use instead. The same method that was used for basements apply to attics or other spots where some of this miscellaneous clutter is stored. And in some cases, an attic maybe is more out of reach and even a better area to let go of items, because if it's up in the attic, are you actually ever going back to it? If there are items you literally never return to and you almost forget that you have them, what's the point? Is that what the item was designed for? Day 20 takes you into a garage or shed. Similar to the last two, these can also be areas where a lot of clutter is stored. Going through these spaces is a great opportunity for you to identify if these items are essential in that space. Technically, a garage is typically used to store and protect your car. But there are some people who fill their garage with stuff instead of their car. Is there a way you could simplify your items to actually have room for your car? Especially if you have items that are broken or in need of repair, but yet you've chosen not to repair them or don't realistically think you'd actually use the repaired version. Going through items here, as well as in places like an attic or basement, is also important because sometimes unfortunate things happen in these areas and the items are damaged. Sometimes people have flooding in their basement or critters in their attic. Some sort of issue that happens and they lose some of the resources that are there. So as you go through these areas as well, you can identify if there are really precious items that should be protected better than they are. Again, when we have less, we can protect each item better. Day 21 is souvenirs. Whether they're souvenirs that you've purchased on past travel or things you've accumulated from various events or that maybe even someone has gifted you from their travel, if it's no longer meaningful to you, you don't need to hold on to it. A lot of this stuff is just pretty junky when you really break it down, and a lot of items don't actually provide the significance that we think they might. You see, I think a photo or your own memories from a vacation matter more than that magnet on your fridge or that mug that you use sometimes. So if they're not valuable to you, let them go. Day 22 is gifts. Gifts can be very tricky, and I know that there's a lot of emotions that get in the way when we're dealing with gifts, especially with fear and guilt. If someone has given you a gift and you're holding on to it, you don't want to get rid of it because they gave it to you, but you don't like it, it's not for you, it doesn't work. We can hold a lot of negative feelings if we let this get the best of us. Here's what I have found to be true though. In the past few years, I've gotten rid of many gifts. And to be honest, it pretty much never actually comes up. But also, I think that for most people, I picture myself, if I gave a gift to someone and it was causing them negative feelings, I would want them to get rid of it. Because I don't want my gifting to be a burden to someone. I don't want them to feel frustrated about a certain item. Plus, if I gave an item to someone, I wanted them to get value out of it. If it's going to sit in a box somewhere, then it should be out there in the world, hopefully giving value to someone else. So we really want to try to take that emotion out of it if possible and actually give the item to a rightful place. I'm sure that even if it wasn't the right gift for you, that item might be the right gift for someone else. Regifting is awesome. Spreading the love. You don't even have to wait for a holiday. If you find yourself holding on to a lot of items to gift that you haven't given, why are you still holding on to them? Let them go. Oftentimes people associate gift giving with certain holidays, which is fine, but a lot of times those items are kind of expected at different holidays, and when you give a gift out of the blue, I think it means a lot more because they weren't expecting it, and it shows that you didn't need a societal expectation to give a gift. You wanted to just because, and that's really meaningful. Day 23 deals with cables and cords. Do you have any cables or cords in your space that you genuinely have no idea what they are, but you hold on to them just in case you're going to need it someday and be like, that's what it was for? I used to do that too, and it got a little out of hand, especially because so many different electronics have different chargers, different cords, and it's tough to know what's what. But today, let's fix that. If you don't know what it is or what it goes to, then you're certainly not going to know when you're trying to figure something out that needs a cord. Sort through all of the cords that you have, and anything that you don't know what it is, or it's from an old electronic or appliance that you don't even have anymore, let go of those. They're not going to serve you any value, and they're kind of junky to look at. So let's get rid of these different cords. Day 24 is craft items. If you find yourself someone who really enjoys arts and crafts, you might find that you've got a lot of different art supplies. If you love your art supplies and they bring you joy, that's amazing. But out of your art supplies, do you have any that you're no longer using? Or are these craft supplies from a certain phase of life that is no longer relevant, or leftovers from a project that you've done and realistically won't get back into? Donating these art supplies is an amazing opportunity, and there are definitely many schools, community centers, women's centers, etc. that would probably benefit from any of these extra crafting supplies. Day 25 is work items. This category is pretty broad just because the items and clutter that we have is going to vary a lot based upon different jobs. Sort through anything you have in your home space from work. Sometimes we know we should save something for a while, but what point is that you can let it go? Can you shred some of your old files? Is there work-related clothing that is outdated or no longer useful? Are there different books and manuals and resources that you no longer need? Perhaps there are items you still need to keep, but they certainly don't need to be in your home anymore. Try to build that separation between your job and your home, so you don't have to constantly feel like you're bringing work back home. It's hard. I was a teacher. I know that. The bottom line is to reduce work-related clutter in your own space, in whatever form that is. Day 26 is paper clutter. Paper clutter can be incredibly frustrating, and it accumulates so quickly. And there's lots of little sheets, so even if you are getting rid of something, it doesn't really feel that satisfying because a sheet of paper is not that big. With paper, it is essential that we preserve the required documents and keep those safe and know where they are. It's obviously going to vary on the person, but any birth records or citizenship records, financial information, medical records, not necessarily everything ever, but the most essential, focus on sorting those out and finding a set place for them. You want to be able to know where they are in case of emergency. Likewise, we want to be mindful of paper we're bringing into our space. Realistically, going through large quantities of paper clutter, such as like a filing cabinet or something, it's not going to happen in a day. But what you can do is start to set up good habits to prevent new paper clutter from coming into your space. That's part of the battle. Start there and see if there are certain items that you can sort out that you maybe don't need anymore. Maybe you can shred certain files. Maybe certain files can be digital now. Go through those. Day 27 is sentimental items. This can be incredibly challenging and painful depending on some of the items you're keeping. I am not here to tell you what you should and shouldn't do with your space and what you should or should not keep, because sentimental items, they're sentimental. There's a special connection to you for whatever reason. The way I like to think about these items is figure out what the absolute most important items are that you're keeping. Whichever ones are most important should be the ones that are highlighted or celebrated or kept. Even though we might not like to think of it this way, if we choose to keep everything, we're saying they're all the same. Nothing is special. But when you really select or curate a specific number of those items, whatever it is for you, you're saying these are special and these are not as special, or these are not special at all. Making those choices means that we're saying that certain items mean something more. And so if you can reflect about that, that helps. And I'm a big fan of the one bin method. So I've got a large plastic tub that contains like my childhood up through now. So my sentimental items all fit in a plastic tub, and I'm very content with that. If you think that method would be helpful for you, you can do that as well. And obviously you've got a space constraint there, as well as if I feel like going down memory lane and reminiscing, it's pretty easy to do so since I know right where the bin is and the items are all in that one bin. Day number 28 is toys. And if you don't have kids, maybe you've got pets. If you don't have pets, maybe you have hobby items that would be considered toys yourself. What toys are no longer being played with by anyone in your household or yourself? Items that brought enjoyment in the past but are no longer in your current phase of life. Oftentimes with kids, they outgrow certain toys, and sometimes those sort of things happen with us. Maybe you've been someone into different games, like a board game or a video game. Oftentimes we go through phases where we enjoy using them for a phase of time, but they don't always stick around long term. Even just a couple months afterwards, you may no longer be reaching for that. Now, it doesn't mean they have to have that quick of a turnover, but if you do find that you have fun items that have not been used recently and you don't really anticipate using again, there's no need they need to be in your space. They'd be better suited for someone else. Day 29 is very difficult for many, and that is other people's clutter. Now, this does not mean taking their stuff and decluttering it for them. That is not what we are recommending. That can lead to feelings of mistrust and frustration down the road. We are not supporting that. What I do think is important, though, is to have conversations about the clutter of others and trying to set some goals for the space. I personally am a firm believer in communicating. So if you've got situations where someone else's clutter is causing you stress, preventing you from having the space of your dreams, etc., that needs to come up in conversation. It might not be pleasant, but if we actually make the effort to talk about them, that can help. And it doesn't mean say, hey, you need to get rid of your clutter because it makes me upset. We need to have a really good dialogue in this situation. I think it will vary for every person or every type of relationship, but if you can raise your concerns to these individuals in your life and try to work towards a common solution, that can be a positive, especially if you maybe make it fun and try to maybe incentivize a non-stuff related reward if the goal that you've set as a couple or as a family is reached. And lastly, day 30 is fantasy self. Fantasy self is the ideal version of ourselves that we think we'd like to be, but actually aren't. And sometimes we buy items related to our fantasy self, but yet we really have no intention of putting it into practice. If you can reflect a little bit about what items you might be purchasing or that you have purchased that connect to this fake idea of yourself that is not reality, those could be items we get rid of. I have done a video on this in the past, but I talked about certain types of exercise equipment that just really I thought I would be into, but I wasn't. I talked about different cooking gadgets that I ideally thought I would use, but just didn't. These items can be tricky because it's letting go of a different part of our identity, not really who we are, but who we maybe thought we would be, and being realistic about it. There's no shame in admitting that, you know what, this was just an ideal version. This isn't who I actually am. Or if you've got items that you've been holding on to, thinking you'd use them, put it to the test. Try using it. See, if you actually enjoy using it, then cool. But if you try using it and you realize, oh, this is definitely not something I want to keep using in the future, that's a great candidate to let go of. Well, there we go. We've made it through all 30 days of the challenge. If you haven't yet picked up your copy of the Decluttering Challenge workbook, that is linked below for you. That makes it a little bit easier to keep track of what to do each day, as well as, like I said, there's the tips and areas for you to reflect about each day and how it went for you. I'm hopeful that this is going to help transform your space, whether you start this upcoming month or whenever it's convenient with you. It's here for you. Happy decluttering. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.